Why is the United Kingdom, historically a pillar of Western democracy, appearing to lean toward Beijing, a regime often criticized by its allies? What could drive a country that once ruled the seas to realign with a rival superpower? The answer lies in a volatile mix of economics, diplomacy, and necessity. In 2023, bilateral trade between the UK and China exceeded £100 billion, making Beijing the UK's third largest trading partner. At the same time, Chinese investments in British infrastructure reached unprecedented levels, with a reported £45 billion poured into projects ranging from nuclear power to renewable energy. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's recent comments offer a glimpse into this shift. While calling China a systemic challenge, he refrained from labeling Beijing a direct threat, marking a noticeable shift in tone from previous UK leadership. But why now? Why is Britain softening its stance toward a country that many of its allies, including the US, view with suspicion? Let's unravel this step by step. The G20 Summit in New Delhi set the stage for Britain's evolving foreign policy. One of the most talked about moments wasn't about trade disputes or climate deals. It was Labour leader Keir Starmer's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Why did this meeting between a British opposition leader and Beijing's top official matter so much? Starmer, who is favored to become the UK's next Prime Minister, focused on economic cooperation during the talks. According to The Guardian, Starmer emphasized the need for pragmatic relations with China, a stance that mirrors Sunak's careful diplomacy. This bipartisan alignment indicates that the UK's pivot to China isn't just a party agenda, it's a national strategy. During the same summit, Xi described China as a partner for global stability. The message was clear. Beijing is positioning itself as an essential player, not just economically but diplomatically. The G20 wasn't just a venue for discussions. It was a declaration of priorities. For Britain, those priorities now include strengthening ties with Beijing. But what events brought the UK to this point? To understand, we need to examine the post-Brexit landscape. Please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us grow. Thank you. Brexit was sold as a moment of sovereignty, a chance for Britain to reclaim its economic and political independence. Instead, it has left the UK facing trade disruptions, labor shortages, and economic stagnation. In the first 2 years after Brexit, UK exports to the EU dropped by nearly 15%, according to the BBC. Add to that inflation and sluggish growth, and the UK finds itself in a precarious position. China has stepped into this void, providing the investment and market access that the UK so desperately needs. Chinese companies now dominate key sectors of Britain's economy. Huawei, despite controversies, continues to play a role in British telecommunications. China General Nuclear Power Corporation is a major investor in Hinkley Point C, a £22 billion nuclear project that's critical to Britain's energy future. Professor Catherine Barnard of Cambridge University explains it this way: Brexit created an economic vacuum. China's capital and market potential have filled that gap, but this comes with strings attached. These strings are raising eyebrows in Washington. Is Britain drifting away from its historic ally in favor of Beijing? Let's dig deeper. For decades, the UK's special relationship with the United States has been its cornerstone alliance. But as Washington doubles down on its hardline stance against China, Britain appears to be charting a different course. Take the technology sector as an example. The Biden administration has imposed sweeping restrictions on semiconductor exports to China, aiming to curb Beijing's tech ambitions. The UK, however, has resisted aligning fully with these measures. British tech firms, heavily reliant on Chinese supply chains, fear that decoupling from Beijing would cripple their operations. According to the Wall Street Journal, London's cautious approach reflects economic pragmatism rather than ideological alignment with Washington. Former Foreign Secretary William Hague warned, the UK risks alienating the US if it prioritizes short-term economic benefits over its long-term strategic alliances. But is this divergence inevitable? Or is Britain simply responding to the realities of an interconnected world? To understand, we must examine why China's strategy is so effective at winning over nations like the UK. China's global diplomacy operates on a principle that's hard to resist: mutual benefit. Instead of demanding political alignment, Beijing offers investments, trade opportunities, and infrastructure development. This approach, often called win-win cooperation, has proven highly effective in forging relationships. Take the Belt and Road Initiative. Although Britain isn't formally part of the BRI, it benefits indirectly from Chinese-funded trade routes and logistics networks. A 2023 report by The Economist noted that Chinese investments in European ports have significantly reduced the cost of UK imports, saving billions annually. Dr. Yu Ji, a senior research fellow at Chatham House, sums it up. China frames its diplomacy as pragmatic and apolitical. This narrative appeals to countries like the UK, which are navigating economic uncertainty. But is China's diplomacy purely economic, or is it also about reshaping its global image? Let's explore how Beijing is redefining its role on the world stage. For years, China was viewed primarily through the lens of its military ambitions and territorial disputes. Today, Beijing is actively reshaping its image, presenting itself as a mediator and stabilizer in global conflicts. One of the most striking examples came in 2023, when China brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The move shocked analysts and highlighted Beijing's growing diplomatic clout. The UK, traditionally a supporter of peace and stability, sees potential in partnering with this new China. Collaborating with a global peacemaker aligns with Britain's foreign policy aspirations. But skeptics warn that this shift in perception is strategic, not altruistic. Gideon Rachman of the Financial Times argues, China's peace diplomacy is part of its broader effort to counter Western narratives and assert its influence. As Beijing's influence grows, one of its most powerful tools remains the Belt and Road Initiative. Let's examine how this initiative is shaping the UK-China relationship. The Belt and Road Initiative is often described as China's grand strategy to reshape global trade. By investing in infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe, Beijing has created a network of economic dependencies. While the UK hasn't officially joined the BRI, its economy is increasingly tied to its outcomes. Take the London Gateway Port, which handles a significant portion of UK-China trade. Chinese investments in logistics and shipping have streamlined operations, reducing costs and boosting efficiency. According to The Economist, 25% of UK container traffic now involves Chinese-owned shipping firms. But these benefits come with risks. Critics warn that dependence on Chinese-controlled infrastructure could undermine Britain's autonomy. Liam Fox, the former trade secretary, cautioned, "Economic convenience cannot outweigh strategic independence." This brings us to the heart of the matter. Is Britain's pivot to China a calculated strategy for survival, or is it a sign of surrender? The UK's pivot to China reflects a balancing act between economic necessity and geopolitical caution. On one hand, Beijing offers the investment and market access that Britain needs to revitalize its economy. On the other, aligning too closely risks compromising national security and values. Dr. Linda Yue, an economist at Oxford University, puts it bluntly. Britain's pivot isn't about surrender. It's about adapting to a changing global order. But adaptation without safeguards can lead to dependency. This balancing act isn't unique to Britain. Across Europe, nations are grappling with the same question. How close is too close when it comes to China? The UK isn't the only Western power rethinking its relationship with Beijing. France and Germany, two of Europe's largest economies, are also pursuing a more pragmatic approach. French President Emmanuel Macron has called for strategic autonomy, arguing that Europe must maintain its independence in global affairs. In 2023, Macron's visit to Beijing resulted in major trade agreements, including a $17 billion deal for Airbus aircraft. Germany, meanwhile, remains heavily reliant on China for exports. The automotive industry alone derives nearly 40% of its revenue from Chinese markets, according to Deutsche Welle. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has advocated for diversification, but remains cautious about severing ties with Beijing. This broader European trend raises questions about how shifting U.S. policies could influence the UK's approach to China. Donald Trump's potential return to the White House could dramatically alter global alliances. During his presidency, Trump's America First policies strained relations with traditional allies, including the UK. His trade wars and unilateral decision-making created a ripple effect that forced many countries to look for alternatives. If Trump resumes office, his confrontational approach to China may leave Britain in a difficult position. Political analysts at The Atlantic suggest that a second Trump presidency could accelerate the UK's pivot to Beijing, as London seeks stability amid Washington's unpredictability. But aligning with China isn't without its risks. Let's examine the potential pitfalls of this partnership. The risks of deepening ties with China are multifaceted. Economically, there's the danger of overdependence. Australia's experience with Chinese trade coercion is a warning sign. After Canberra called for an investigation into COVID-19's origins, Beijing imposed tariffs on Australian goods, causing billions in losses. Politically, closer ties with Beijing could alienate traditional allies like the US and EU. A 2023 report by the UK Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee warned, unchecked Chinese investments in critical sectors could undermine Britain's strategic autonomy. Ethically, aligning with China raises questions about the UK's commitment to human rights. Beijing's treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang and its suppression of democracy in Hong Kong have drawn widespread condemnation. Can Britain afford to look the other way? These risks highlight the complexities of the UK-China relationship. But what does this mean for the global balance of power? The UK's pivot is part of a larger trend challenging US dominance. As nations like Britain, France, and Germany deepen their ties with Beijing, the post-World War II order is being redefined. China's rise as an economic superpower, combined with its diplomatic initiatives, poses a direct challenge to Washington's leadership. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, China now accounts for 30% of global economic growth, compared to 18% for the US. The question isn't whether the US will remain a global power. It will. The question is whether it can adapt to a multipolar world where China is an equal rival. Britain's shift toward China symbolizes a broader transformation in global politics. As economic power shifts eastward, traditional alliances are being tested. The UK must decide whether it will lead in navigating this new order or risk becoming a cautionary tale. The stakes are enormous, not just for Britain, but for the entire global system. How this story unfolds will shape the next century. The UK's pivot to China is more than an economic decision. It's a reflection of the seismic shifts redefining global power. Will Britain's gamble pay off, or will it risk losing its influence and autonomy in the process? As power shifts eastward, one thing is clear. The world is watching. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.